Okay, hello, welcome back to the Land Rover Toolbox videos. This is not about spray painting, this is about a compressor that we use. You've seen enough of our videos to know that we use a compressor quite a lot. And the last video that we did, the last upload, was about air tools or some different type of air tools. And it's just to make you aware of what's actually on the market. And the stuff that I bring home from work, usually I'm using air tools all the time, but I use them at home as well when I need to, which means I need a compressor. Comment we had from 4B, interesting tool, out of interest, what size compressor are you using to drive it? Well, as I said, I'd make a video to show you, but I will show you. First of all, I just want to give people a heads up that 4B make tools, they sell tools. And this one Neil's actually engineered himself, is for the LT77, for taking the nut off the back. It's a specialist nut. I'll just thank Neil for, well, it was a bit too late because I had to cut up a socket, which was a hub socket, and I got a new one. However, this is a valid question that I'm going to answer, but I'm also going to show you me servicing my compressor because it actually was overdue for a service, and I just forgot all about it until Neil reminded me. Okay, so here's the compressor. This is an SIP 3 horsepower 150 litre tank or receiver on it. I've had to take it out of its hole and put it on the engine crane. So basically, yeah, it's an Airmate 3HP 150 SRB compressor. So just a quick Google search, the similar type but with wheels was £627 including VAT. And I didn't pay anywhere near that. I got mine off a special from a local shop, but same thing. It's 8.5 CFM free air delivery, even though it says it's 13 CFM piston displacement up to 145 psi, and the noise level in decibels is 96 decibels, which actually is quite loud, and I'll show you that. It usually lives in this little shed here, and this is, for want of a better word, a noise box. And now I'll demonstrate the difference from having the door shut and having the door open with the compressor running. Okay, so you get the idea, it needs to be soundproofed. So, maintenance, yeah, this is what I'm going to talk about. Basically, you have your dailies, weeklies, monthly, and every 3 months. That would be for daily use, obviously. And basically, what it tells you to do, other than drain the tank daily, you really need to check the air filter. Now, this air filter, because it's been in the shed, hasn't been subjected to half as much dust as it usually would, but it's something you'll take off and wash and then put back on again. Okay, so draining the tank daily, usually you drain it before you use it, or every morning, especially if you're using it every day. The thing is here, I was quite surprised that it had no moisture come out of here at all, and after a couple of weeks I'm wondering what the hell's going on. But when I picked the tank up I realised it was full of water, so with a little bit of a poke with something, it revealed that there is actually water in this tank, so the tap is blocked. You can see that here. This was actually about a quarter of a tank full of water. Now, basically, compressors pick up moisture from the air and they'll retain them in the tank. When there's enough in the tank, it will start pushing it through the airline. At work, I've taken nearly 70 litres out of a tank before. Right, so this was the problem. This is sludge and something blocking the tap up. No biggie, however, it is a biggie if you start pushing water through your airlines. So now it's clear. I can then put some PTFE tape on it and put it back on and know at least I'm going to be able to drain it. The best way to do is to drain with air pressure behind it, but make sure you have your hand away from where the air comes out so you don't hurt yourself. Right, so the compressor itself has a 3 horsepower motor. Details are on the top there if you want to read them. Not that it's that interesting. We know that it runs on 240. It runs a 2-piston compressor here. This is what actually compresses the air, pushes it into the tank, and this is oil lubricated, as you can see there. Underneath is the drain plug, and I'll show you this a bit later, how awkward it actually is in that position. So the motor runs the compressor with a drive belt. Always check this with the compressor unplugged, obviously. The tension of the belt and the condition of the pulley wheels is important. Make sure there's no cracks and it's not been skidding. That's okay, so I'll put the cover back on. Always make sure that the cover is secure, because it could be your safety or your child's safety, or your pet's or your spouse's safety, depending on who you live with. Right, compressors run on compressor oil, and it's something like SEA 30. Which needs to be changed apparently every 3 months. I do it annually because I don't run this every day. This is not a dipstick. This is actually where you fill it up, or the filler tube, with a breather, and the breather also needs to be checked as well so the crank isn't pressurizing. Otherwise, like vehicles, it'll push oil out of the seals. So basically here is the oil level sight glass, which is brilliant, and then lower down we have the drain plug, and this one, just assessing it, you can see what sort of trouble I'm going to get myself into trying to drain it out. So from a bit of experience, to use a little bit of a tin plate, or in this case is a long vehicle board, to direct the oil to where it should go. However, it didn't want to go where I wanted it to, and it went absolutely everywhere. And even with this tank out of the shed, for instance, this is a pain in the backside. So you can imagine what it would be like if you were trying to service it with it fixed on the ground. So basically, yeah, the oil took a long time to come out, and I had to clean up afterwards. But never mind, that happens, doesn't it? And you can see I'm just nipping up the bung plug, and you can see the oil still dripping everywhere. After a bit of a clean up, then I put about half a litre of compressor oil back in it again, and it's basically just slowly topping it up until it comes to the right level on the sight glass. This is a little bit too high maybe, but according to the manual I looked on the internet with, it goes right up to the top of the circle, if you like, so it's not really a problem. This will be okay for, well, the next year. Anyway, one thing that is important is that you, with your compressor, is to cure leaks. I know some people don't care when they work in professional workshops. You can hear hissing everywhere, but it actually wastes energy to have your compressor running all the time, and the compressor really never gets up to optimum pressure, does it? Right, so PTFE tape, and just making sure that where I had a leak on this union, that it's going to be sound. And surprisingly, 20mm spanner that I'm using here was actually the first time I'd ever used it on anything. Usually use an adjustable spanner. That isn't available at the moment, so I grabbed this from the toolbox, and it's had its virgin use. These unions are tapered, so you basically screw them up until you can feel them bite. You go a little bit tighter, and that's as far as you go. So there you go, look, the use of a 20mm spanner. Since the compressor vibrates itself quite a lot, it's worth checking places like up here, which is the air cooler, which is the outlet of the compressor, and the compressor pipes, bung plugs, and anywhere else there are any unions. This plastic union goes off to the pressure relief valve, and these bungs are just spare, just in case you want to put more fittings into them. And believe me, they are really hard to remove. Okay, so on the tank itself, it gives you the maximum operating pressure. Now, if you can see that, 150 litre tank, and up here it says 11 bar. Right, so there you go, 150 litres and 11 bar maximum working pressure. So this won't go over 150 psi, and what we have to do is to check the pressure regulator, which is electronic. You can see the black pipe I showed you earlier. That is here, that goes into the pressure regulator, and that's what switches the motor on and off. Okay, the red knob up there is a switch. You also have a safety pressure valve, which is mechanical, which you have to have on air equipment. Right, so hanging the compressor, obviously you probably won't do this at home, but I'm just showing you I'm using strops. And this is a bow shackle at the top there on the engine crane, so she's fairly secure. And what I'm going to do is run it up, check for leaks, and make sure the pressure relief valve is working. This mechanical pressure relief valve, okay, it gets easier to pull up the more pressure there is in the system. I just accidentally switched that off. This will burst off before it reaches the tank safety pressure, or the safety limits. That'll be 150 psi. Now I've got this running and it has stopped at a certain pressure which I'm looking for. It should be 145, but it's not. What we're looking at here is 100 and, let me have a look, it's 130, 128 psi that it's actually stopped at. So that is our working pressure. It won't go any further than that. So I'll just focus in on there. You can see that. That's 128 psi. So I'm just going to drop a little bit of air out of it, keeping my hand out of the way, until I can hear the motor cut back in again. And I know you can't see the gauge here because this is a little bit live, and I was on the other end of the compressor, but this is actually showing that it started up again at 100 psi. So basically it starts up 100 psi and stops at 128. Right, so the compressor's all done, and now I'll get it back in the shed. It's serviced and ready for the next onslaught of work. I'd just like to say that when you're going to approach taking off parts off a compressor, ensure that it is completely drained. Now the gauge on this reads 0 and it's still letting out compressed air. You need to make sure it is completely empty, so any valves, you just let them drain completely out. And you can see, and you can listen, it's at 0 and she's still chuffing pressure out. So just be aware of this, because if you knock off a union, it could slap you in the face or somewhere even worse.